the origins of that sales pitch back to its corporate source.
Which is not the agent.
No, the language an agent uses doesn't originate with the agent. It is completely manufactured upstream.
And the sources point to a very specific moment that captures this perfectly. So back in early May, the CEO of one of the country's largest residential brokerages was on a quarterly earnings call.
With institutional investors, right?
Exactly. And he was pitching them on two ideas that frankly just seemed completely at odds with each other. First, he was leaning heavily into the rhetoric of seller choice.
Ah, right.
Yeah, he argued that traditional multiple listing service rules, the MLS, the central database where all properties are pooled, he said those are just private mandates.
And that sellers should have total flexibility to market their homes however they want outside of that system.
Right. Which, on the surface, that sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
As a consumer, seller choice sounds like pure empowerment. It sounds like they're handing you the steering wheel.
But in the exact same breath on that investor call, he lays out a commitment to three, what he called AI defensive pillars.
Right, the defensive pillars.
Yeah, which were engineering transformation, workflow automation, and agent productivity. And he explicitly framed these pillars to investors as the primary drivers of margin expansion.
And let's translate that from corporate earnings speak.
Please do.
Margin expansion basically just means finding ways to squeeze more profit out of every single transaction.
Okay, so how do those two things go together? Because it sounds like a contradiction.
Well, to the CEO, they aren't contradictory at all. They're actually mutually reinforcing. You see, the traditional MLS validation infrastructure introduces rules and oversight.
And corporations hate rules.
Exactly. In a corporate system, rules create friction. Removing that friction means the brokerage can internalize the transaction.
Oh, I see.
And doing that expands their profit margins. That expanded margin is the literal blood oath promise they make to Wall Street investors.
So this seller choice thing is just a smokescreen.
Yes, seller choice is simply the consumer-friendly marketing disguise for a pipeline built to feed the brokerage's own AI and data architecture.
Wow. It's like, imagine a massive chain restaurant heavily promoting a new Diner's Choice menu.
Okay.
You sit down, and the menu boldly says, you are in control. Build your own meal. But what you don't know is that the corporate chef in the back has secretly designed every single combination on that menu.
Using the cheapest ingredients.
Exactly. They use the exact same cheap ingredients that maximize the restaurant's profit margin. So you feel incredibly empowered making your little choices, but the house always wins.
Because the menu itself was engineered entirely for the house. That is a brilliant way to picture it, actually.
Thanks.
You're choosing among options that the system has already pre-shaped to its own advantage. And the reason this operates so smoothly is because of this elaborate corporate telephone game.
Right, the downward filter.
Exactly. The margin expansion strategy discussed on that earnings call slowly filters downward. Middle management translates it into internal communications.
Which then turns into training materials.
Yes. Training materials, marketing playbooks, and recommended scripts for the listing presentations.
So by the time it actually reaches the real estate agent on the ground, all that cold corporate machinery has been scrubbed off.
Completely scrubbed. The agent absorbs these strategies as genuine, cutting-edge professional vocabulary.
So they aren't trying to trick you.
Not at all.
Yeah.
When they sit across from you, they use this language because it is the toolkit their brokerage gave them. You hear it as if it originated right there in the room, custom-tailored for your house.
Because you don't see the corporate communications upstream.
Right. And you definitely aren't reading the transcripts of investor earnings calls.
Which brings us to the actual pitch. Now that we know where this language comes from, let's look at how it physically manifests when you sit down to sell.
The recommendation patterns.
Yeah. The sources outline a sequence of specific recommendations agents are trained to make. Let's start with the first thing they will likely suggest, the coming soon phase.
The soft launch.
Right. They'll say, hey, we should do a soft launch. Put a coming soon sign up to build early interest and get a pipeline of pre-qualified buyers.
Sounds great, right?
Yeah, as a seller, I hear that and think, wow, I'm getting exclusive VIP access for my house.
Well, that marketing advantage is exactly what you're meant to hear. But structurally, something entirely different is unfolding behind the scenes.
What's actually happening?
When you agreed to a coming soon phase, your listing is essentially placed into a holding pen.
A holding pen.
Yes. And the brokerage's pipeline economics deeply depend on this holding pen. For one, The days on market clock stays officially paused.
Which creates a false sense of novelty when it does go live.
Exactly. But more importantly, the brokerage is internally harvesting engagement data. They are calibrating their own pricing algorithms against the early feedback your house is generating.
Wait, let me get this straight. If they are keeping the listing in this internal walled garden before it hits the open market,
Yes.
are they basically using my house as bait to generate buyer leads for their own agents?
That is the hidden mechanism. The brokerage captures lucrative lead generation revenue before your listing ever reaches the true open marketplace. They are monetizing your home's data while restricting its visibility. And the crucial thing to remember is that the agent genuinely doesn't see this mechanism.
Right, because of the telephone game.
Exactly. They've simply been trained in weekly sales meetings to view the coming soon period as a premium service to you.
Okay, so they've gathered all this early engagement data during the soft launch. Where does that data actually go?
It feeds directly into the next thing they pitch you.
The proprietary AI tools.
Yes. They'll tell you they use advanced AI to write the listing descriptions and generate social media materials.
Which, again, sounds incredibly efficient, like faster turnaround, professional polish.
It does sound like a modern convenience.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the hidden data flow here. When you agree to this, your listing data, your interior photos, your property details, your neighborhood attributes,
It all just gets sucked up.
it flows straight into the brokerage's corporate AI systems. And because this is happening internally, the outputs often aren't rigorously validated by external systems.
And the sources point out that this is where AI hallucinations happen, right?
Yes, exactly. Imagine an AI tool generating your listing description, and it scans a photo of your laminate flooring.
And it falsely identifies it as rare Brazilian hardwood or something.
Right. Or it pulls incorrect school district boundaries. Because it isn't externally validated, that hallucinated error propagates instantly at the speed of the brokerage's distribution network.
So suddenly, your house is being marketed with false claims?
Yes.
And I'm guessing that data doesn't just evaporate once my house is sold.
Definitely not.
It's like how a social media network uses your personal photos to train their algorithms to keep people scrolling. The brokerage is using my house's data to train their internal systems.
That is a very accurate comparison. Your home's specifics become a permanent input for the brokerage's broader corporate AI infrastructure.
So I'm basically free labor.
You are essentially training their corporate models in ways that your listing agreement absolutely does not specify, and for which you are certainly not compensated.
Geez. Now, for those AI models to get really good at predicting the market, they need time and they need boundary testing.
Which brings us to the third pattern.
The pricing strategy. The agent will often suggest, let's price aspirationally and adjust if we need to.
The market testing strategy.
Basically, starting at a price notably higher than what the comparable sales in your neighborhood suggest.
It is incredibly common.
But let me push back on this one for a second.
Sure.
Because honestly, isn't starting with a high price just smart negotiating?
I mean, it seems like it.
Right. You can always drop the price, but you can't raise it once it's listed. Why wouldn't a seller want to test the waters and see if they can catch a desperate buyer willing to overpay?
It's highly intuitive, which is exactly why it's such an effective pitch to make to a homeowner. But let's look at the structural reality of the pipeline trap you are entering.
Okay.
If you set a price that is too high to attract immediate, realistic offers, your property just sits there. It gets trapped in the brokerage's pipeline for a much longer period.
Until it either sells or you finally drop the price to meet the actual market.
Right.
But why does the brokerage benefit from my house being trapped?
Because their pricing test infrastructure needs volume and duration to learn.
Right.
Every single day, your overpriced home sits in their system. It generates engagement metrics.
It's boundary testing data for their algorithms.
Exactly. The brokerage is continuously harvesting valuable market intelligence from your listing. They are learning exactly where the price ceiling is in your neighborhood.
And let's break down the real-world math of that for the seller, because this is wild.
It is.
If my house sits on the market for an extra 45 days just so their algorithm can learn the price ceiling, I am still paying the mortgage for those 45 days.
You absolutely are.
I'm paying the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, the utilities. That could be $4,000 or $5,000 out of my pocket.
Easily.
So I am personally financing the carrying costs to act as a free focus group for their corporate data experiments.
That is the harsh reality of it. The time spent in the pipeline produces extremely useful intelligence. But that intelligence has financial value to the brokerage entirely independent of your outcome as a seller.
So eventually, after the soft launch and the price testing, you want the house fully out there,
Right.
which leads to the final pitch, portal syndication.
Yes.
The agent says, we are going to syndicate your listing through our partner portals for broad exposure. And to a layman, syndication just means blasting your listing out to the big websites like Zillow or Realtor.com so everyone on the internet sees it.
Because more eyes means more buyers.
Right.
Broad exposure is the hook. But the reality of modern portal syndication is that this exposure is strictly contained within the brokerage's monetization infrastructure.
Wait, what does that mean?
These portal partnerships are highly complex corporate deals. They involve revenue sharing arrangements, lead routing agreements, and conditional data feeds.
Meaning the brokerage is actually getting paid by these websites to provide them with my house's data.
Yes. The brokerage captures lead revenue and referral fees from these partnerships. They monetize the traffic your house generates.
Unbelievable.
But remember, the seller is the one paying for the listing's presence in those channels through the hefty commission structure. You are financing the fuel for their lead generation machine. What's fascinating here is that if you look at the entire sequence, the coming soon phase, the AI data ingestion, the aspirational pricing test, the portal syndication, the agent is not deceiving you.
The sources are crystal clear about this. I want to underline that. The agent is not lying to you at the kitchen table.
Not at all. They are delivering recommendations they have been thoroughly trained to deliver. They are equipped with talking points they have been assured are the absolute best practices in the industry.
So they believe it too.
They genuinely believe these are seller-friendly strategies because that is the only reality they have been briefed on. The agent's good faith is entirely real.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if all these recommendations secretly favor the brokerage's bottom line and use your house as corporate data fodder, the natural consumer instinct is to think, my agent is a scammer. I'm being conned.
Right, that's the knee-jerk reaction.
But the truth is, the agent is an innocent party here. They are trapped in the exact same hidden architecture as you are.
This is what we call the concept of the execution pawn.
The execution pawn.
Yes. The agent didn't engineer the pipeline. They didn't program the AI hallucination risks. They didn't invent the compensation structures or negotiate the backroom revenue sharing with the partner portals.
They are just the moving piece required to execute the architecture.
Exactly. The entire multi-billion-dollar machine does not move without a human agent sitting at your kitchen table, getting you to agree to the process.
But that agent doesn't see the whole chessboard.
No, they don't. Which raises a really pivotal question.
What's that?
When exactly does this massive conflict of interest physically manifest in the real world? Because it isn't a slow, abstract drift. It happens in a very precise, legally binding moment.
Oh, I know this. The moment the pen hits the paper, the signature.
Yes. When you, the seller, sign the listing agreement, a profound structural paradox is installed.
How so?
By signing that document, you legally create a fiduciary duty. And fiduciary duty is a strict legal mandate. It means the agent now owes you undivided loyalty.
They have an absolute legal obligation to put my financial interests above their own or their firm's.
Right. The signature creates the duty, but the agent already has pre-existing, deeply ingrained competing obligations to the brokerage that employs them. The brokerage's pipeline economics completely depend on the agent routing your listing into the exact systems we just talked about.
So they are caught in the middle.
Yes. The agent's training defaults, their software platforms, and their own compensation structures are all built around rewarding the workflows the brokerage needs to expand those margins.
Right. The signature creates the fiduciary duty to you, but the competing corporate obligations were already running in the background.
It's a structural conflict, not a behavioral one.
Meaning the agent doesn't suddenly decide to be a bad person after you sign.
Exactly. The structure they operate within is inherently conflicted from day one.
That is a crucial distinction, and we should probably clarify something here.
Sure.
The sources frame this as an ethical observation about an architecture. It isn't necessarily a legal claim that every listing agreement constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty.
Right. That is something for lawyers to litigate in court. And the legal landscape around real estate commissions is shifting rapidly right now anyway.
But ethically, the observation is clear. The bad faith isn't in the agent, and it certainly isn't in you, the seller.
No. The bad faith is entirely upstream. It's in the corporate suite that built a system that fundamentally compromises the fiduciary duty the agent sincerely intends to honor.
So both you and the agent are operating inside an architecture neither of you fully sees.
Yes. Every award, every bonus, every piece of encouragement in the agent's professional environment confirms that what they are offering you is the gold standard of service.
So what does this all mean? If you are listening to this and you are getting ready to sign a listing agreement to sell your home, what do? The system is rigged from the corporate level down, the infrastructure favors the house, and your agent is totally in the dark.
It feels a bit helpless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What leverage do you actually have? Because at the end of the day, you still need to sell your house.
You do.
Hmm.
But the sources don't just leave you with the problem. They outline a very specific tool for the seller.
Oh, good.
It's a tactic you can use right at the listing presentation, sitting at your kitchen table. They call it the Columbo question.
Huh. Like the old TV detective in the trench coat. Just one more thing.
Exactly that energy. So, for any of those 4 recommendations we discussed, you pause the presentation and ask a very simple, polite question.
Okay, what is it?
Will this recommendation serve my interests better or your firm's?
Oh, wow. So like, will pausing the market clock for a coming soon phase serve my interest better or your firm's? Or, if we price aspirationally and my house sits for 45 days, who really benefits from the time we spend in the pipeline?
Yes. Now, the key to the Columbo question is how you listen to the answer.
Okay, what am I listening for?
You are not trying to extract a dramatic, tearful confession. The agent doesn't have a confession to make.
Right, they don't know.
They will almost certainly offer you sincere reassurance. They will look you in the eye and tell you that your interests and the firm's interests are perfectly aligned.
So if they give you that standard reassurance, did they fail the test? Are they a terrible agent?
No. And this is critical. You are listening for category, not for content.
Category.
Yes, you are testing their self-awareness of the massive system they work within. The sources break the results down into 2 types of agents.
Okay.
If the agent confidently reassures you with the standard corporate talking points, it tells you they operate blindly inside the architecture.
They have no external vantage point on their own industry. Yeah. They drank the corporate Kool-Aid. They are still a professional trying to do their best, but they are flying blind.
Yes, but if the agent pauses and thoughtfully acknowledges your question, if they can articulate that, yes, the brokerage does capture valuable data during the coming soon phase, or that the AI tools do ingest your listing for corporate models, but they still believe the strategy is worth it for you because of X, Y, and Z reasons.
Then what?
Then you have found something exceedingly rare.
You found an agent with an external vantage point.
Precisely. They can actually see the chessboard they are standing on, and they're willing to look at it with you.
That is the goal. You aren't looking for a morally pure agent who has somehow magically opted out of the real estate industry.
No, that doesn't exist.
You just need to know which category of professional you are hiring to guide your largest financial asset.
It's all about achieving true informed consent. Because as a single seller, you cannot restructure a multi-billion-dollar corporate IT system.
Right. You can't dismantle the dominant architecture just to sell your 3-bedroom house.
Exactly.
Right.
But by asking that Columbo question, you recognize exactly what you were signing into. You ensure you aren't going to be blindsided later when the system acts like the system. If we connect this to the bigger picture, massive hidden architectures like this do not change overnight.
Yeah, that takes time.
You can't just snap your fingers and undo decades of corporate pipeline engineering. These structures only shift through the slow, collective accumulation of informed observation.
Right.
It takes consumers, agents, and eventually regulators finally learning to name what the system actually is, rather than blindly accepting what the marketing brochure says it is.
Which means, just by spending this time with us on this deep dive, you are now one of those informed observers.
You are.
You are equipped to see the invisible corporate plumbing beneath your next real estate transaction. You know that the neutral pipe is a myth.
You can walk into that transaction with your eyes wide open, asking the right questions.
Always the best way to operate. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, slightly uncomfortable thought to mull over. We've spent this entire time dissecting the real estate industry. We've seen how upstream corporate training can so completely and sincerely shape an agent's reality that they become entirely blind to the structural conflicts of their own daily job.
They believe their own marketing just as much as the customer does.
Exactly. So take a step back and look at your own job, look at your own industry. What widely accepted best practices or standard workflows in your profession might actually be secretly serving a hidden corporate architecture rather than the clients you genuinely get out of bed wanting to help?
Oof, that is a question that applies far beyond real
It
estate.
really does. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.